to do with this redundant, sloping, overgrown space at the top of this steep garden? How about a garden room? Or maybe a barbecue area? It's big enough to build a little mini house, or a lovely flat lawn for watching sunsets. Either way, we've got to make it flat somehow, and let's think about a sequence. I need to clear the space, level it, and at the same time prevent all the surrounding land slumping by building some kind of retaining wall. It's in such an inaccessible area at the summit of this steeply sloping, overgrown and neglected land. I'm going to have to dig it out all by hand, find a place to relocate all the unwanted soils and carry all the materials up and down the hill by hand. No mini digger for me. Access is pretty much impossible for anything other than a person. For the tools that I think I'm going to need to cut back this overgrown den and to get the uglier trees and overgrown weeds away, I'll need to clear out all this bush, and for that I'll need a combination of this petrol rotary brush cutter and this DeWalt hedge trimmer. I'll bag the cuttings and take for recycling in these big canvas bags, but for the really prickly stuff I'm going to use this incinerator to burn it. Just talking to my neighbours first to make sure they're cool with that, as well as my local council's policy on burning organic waste in your garden. While cutting down the trees and branches, I'll use this DeWalt mini chainsaw with a large battery, and I'll be sure to have adequate face, ear and foot protection. For my hands, I'll use these chainsaw gloves. They've saved me in the past while using these highly dangerous tools. I tend to use the smaller battery sizes for things like impact drivers and combo drills to keep them light in my hands, but for circular saws and chainsaws, you'll need the bigger battery. Now with the land cleared, it's time to set out where I want my dig to start, which in turn will set out the position of my new retaining wall. I'll set out very approximately using these battens. I'll lie them on the floor, and then using a combination of a tape measure, a digital measure and Google Maps, I'll get a bit more detailed a plan. I'll spray down the footprint accurately and then get a good night's sleep. I've got a week or two of serious digging ahead of me, and I'm no muscle man. I'm going to be digging down about 1.2 metres from the highest point over this footprint, which is a huge amount of fill to excavate by hand, and I need to plan what to do with all of that soil. I'll be creating a series of terraces with it along both sides, which I'll talk about in some other time. I'll be using this simple electric mini tiller, sometimes called a cultivator, and you can spend more, but really for the price and the amount of times I'll be using it, this one's fine. And if you're building a garden room or outbuilding where you need a power supply or water or drainage in a trench, it's really good for forming the trench as its dimensions are perfect size for that. I'll use this hand pick, and I'll use a bigger shovel with angled edges. I'll need a wheelbarrow. This one with a puncture-proof tyre is what I recommend, and I'll use this grafter shovel for any tree roots or boulders I need to get through or lever out. Now let's get started. There's not a lot to this that I can tell you that you probably don't know already. It's really just about elbow grease and perseverance. Unfortunately, I lost a lot of the footage due to my lack of intelligence when it comes to filming time lapses, but safe to say it was pretty hard work. 8 days in total, because I did this in the middle of a very dry period. The land was totally solid, and it also had boulder clay close to the surface, and therefore I didn't really bother with any shoring. Now where there's any doubt, you should consider some form of temporary propping if you're going as deep as I am, and there's any hint of any movement. I made these temporary shores for this project using 4x2s and OSB. The principle would be similar here, except you would be constructing a triangular shaped shoring with the struts, because you're only supporting one side, with the OSB obviously going against the side you're supporting. Layer I'm going down about 200 millimeters using the tiller to loosen and then the pick to break up. And the deeper you get, the harder packed the soil is, and the more you use the pick and less you use the tiller. To the depth depth I want, I'll take some basic levels using a piece of 6x2 timber, and then it's time to consider the retaining wall. Now I've dug the footprint I wanted, plus the thickness of the retaining wall, plus the thickness of the field drain, which I'll run around the upper side to relieve the pressure and divert the groundwater and down the hill. Now let's talk about the design of the retaining wall. The trend at the moment seems to be railway sleepers, big chunky 200 by 100 slabs of timber. Now aside from the crazy cost and weight of them, my issue is how to get them really firmly bedded into the ground so as to cover the lateral thrust of all the ground these sleepers are holding back. And my preference is to use these galvanized H sections at 1 meter centers. Super strong if you orientate the web to work at right angles to the direction of the slope. These are from a company I believe called DuraPost, and I'm going to use these to support 45 by 200 millimeter pressure treated C24 graded structural timbers. And I can get these posts set really rigid in concrete pockets by using a post hole digger, digging very deep into the ground and securing the posts rigid by pouring concrete into the hole. You need to dig down about half again of whatever height your post is for the depth of your hole, and that's an absolute minimum to prevent any rotation of the post as the pressure on the timber builds up. So if I'm at 1.2 meters high here, the depth of the post hole would be an absolute minimum of 600 millimeters plus about 50 millimeters cover at the base. For something where I'm not supporting a building, postcrete is fine, and I'll use one bag for each hole. I'll get these bags delivered on a pallet rather than lugging them by hand in the vehicle. And whilst one of us keeps each post as vertical as possible, the other puts in the water first, and then the postcrete damps down with a piece of timber to get it all mixed in, and then use this little magnetic boat bead and level it in both directions. This is a cracking little tool and one that you'll use forever, so it's a real worthwhile investment. The links to all the tools and materials I'm using for this project are in the description. I'll also include access to my material spreadsheet for you to download and adjust to your own quantities. Be careful with postcrete, you've just got a few minutes before it begins to set to get to the point where you can no longer make your adjustments. I'll leave a day or two for these posts to get solid, and then I'll measure out my C24s, which have been delivered to me in 4.8 meter lengths. And before I get them in place, and even though these have been factory treated, I'll paint the back sides and the undersides with a few coats of bitumen. This stuff can make indispensable for any and all of your outdoor work. See my video on decking, for example, and how to create a supporting frame that incorporates bitumen and will last you forever. Then I'll put them in stretcher bond style, making sure the bottom one is spaced off the ground by about 15 millimeters and it's totally level. I'll use this fantastic bead to ensure everything is super level. The great thing about these H posts are that they have fixing holes incorporated, so I can drive in these decking screws through and into the timber, which will then grab the timber and pull it hard up to the posts to make the whole thing work together against the land and do its job as a retaining wall. I'll go around all three sides, butting up at the corners to maximise the strength, building up at the contours of the retained land. Start with a backfill. Here I'm using these 25 kilogram bags of 20 millimeter stones. Try to choose the slightly rounded ones as opposed to the sharp chippings so as to maximise air gaps, since you want the groundwater to be able to migrate as easily as possible down to where we're going to place the field drain. But we'll save that one, all about the drainage, the fabric and the pressure, for another video. Please give me a thumbs up, it really helps me, and thanks a lot for watching.